welcome back. Happy New Year. Happy lack of snow day. We'd like to go ahead and get started. And after we call the roll, we'll give each one of our new board members an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Sue Burton.
Here.
David Harrington.
Here.
Matthew Crutcher.
Here.
Laura Bellin.
Present.
Gary Waters.
Here.
Mark Munson.
Present.
Landon Moore.
Here.
Derek Challenger.
Present.
Solomon Ashby. Elizabeth Gooden.
Present.
Barbara Dameron.
Here.
Alice Kelly.
Here.
You have a quorum and a full board.
I know, isn't it wonderful? We should celebrate in some way.
It's the new
shape, or-
people.
Huh?
It's the new people game.
Yes, and all the old people too, so, great. So let's go ahead and start in alphabetical order. And Landon, if you would like to introduce yourself, just briefly as to your background. And
Hello, everyone. Landon Moore. I was born and raised in Portsmouth and left for a little bit, but been back. I currently work at Smithfield Foods, and I work on their company. We have a company-sponsored pension plan that I look after. Been there about 10 years and working on the pension specifically for about 5. So I saw the board opening and wanted to help out, so here I am.
thank you very much. We are so happy. And Mr. Munson?
Good morning, Mark Munson, proud homeowner on Kearney Farm Lane in Portsmouth. My wife and I built our home and moved in there, the 1st of March 2003. So we've been in the neighborhood for a number of years now. We have chosen Portsmouth as our adopted home following 30 years in the Navy. I had retired from the Navy in April of 2005. Worked for a little bit, about a year for Tidewater Youth Services Commission, and then was drawn to Federal Civil Service, and I'm in my 12th year of Federal Civil Service. Background is in healthcare administration and finance and education. So glad to be here and serve.
Thank you so much. Well, of course, we have apologized already for the lateness of the minutes, but when you have like 5 snow days and nobody's in the office to be able to screen and read and all, did everybody get a chance to briefly review the minutes?
Yes.
I just wanted to make one comment because I've been assisting with punctuation and stuff like that on the minutes. And when we have a financial meeting, as we did and that was reported, do you all need this much detail in the minutes? Or could she just do like bullet points saying that so-and-so addressed this page or this topic on this page unless it's something that sort of diverges from the actual point that was written? How do you all feel?
I like the detail, especially if we have members who may not be there. It's such an important part of our accountability.
I agree.
Okay, I just wanted to check. I mean, because if everybody's closely reading them, then we will stick to that format.
Sorry, Gail.
It's what you guys want.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's easier to do it that way.
All right, Mr. Crutcher, motion, Ms. Bellin is seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. We're moving on to applications for retirement, deceased retirees, beneficiaries, active participants. I believe there's like one retirement.
PRS, actually, Terry Jackson is vested. We had no actual applications for retirement. Under reported deaths, Richard Dignard, who's also a PRS retiree, passed away. 50% spousal annuity payable to Ms. Joyce Dignard. And active participants as of January 1st, we have 20 in fire and police and 18 in Portsmouth Supplemental.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mosier. Any questions about any of that? All right, the recurring business report. It's right behind the list of retirees.
I included 2 so that you could see the October, but I'm going to read from the November. And just for our new members, it is always about 1 month behind. The December numbers won't be posted for about another week on the website. But year-to-date, as of November 30th, we have beginning balance of $230,630,954.83. We had interest income of $1,440,414.85. We've had administrative expenses of $64,403.12. We had return of benefit payments year-to-date, $15,920.85.
Do you want to explain briefly what that means for the new members?
That's if a member has passed away and notification was not received immediately and the money was paid out. This is where it was returned to the trust fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Recurring benefit payments, year-to-date, $12,458,430.09. Employer contributions, $2,772,251.68. A realized gain of $1,231,050.02. An unrealized gain of $8,415,278.30. We have had a net change year-to-date of $1,352,082.49, leaving us with an ending balance $231,983,037.32. This is better than where we were. I apologize, I did not change the dates. Last year, at this time, of $8,222,572.12.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Mosier. Appreciate that. All right, unfinished business.
Before we go, I'd like to ask a question, Mrs. Mosier. If somebody applies for retirement this month, to be effective the 31st of this month,
Okay,
would they be on here, or is that for next month?
that would be next month.
Okay, all right.
We would start to see that.
I got a question too.
Yes, sir.
Say a person comes in, and they want to apply for retirement, and you think they're not eligible.
I don't handle that. That's handled by HR.
I'm not specifically talking about
Okay.
you. Whoever takes the application feels they're not eligible, okay? So they say, well, we can't take your application. Then 2 years later, we find out they are eligible. I don't think it's right to refuse an application, whether they are eligible or not eligible. I think we should always take an application. And I'm specifically referring to Ruth Hume's case. In 2014, she tried to put in paperwork for retirement. She was not even allowed to apply. And
Yeah, excuse me.
so now I'm speaking in generality, but I just referenced her. But according to what I've been told, she wasn't allowed to apply. And I just don't feel, if that's the case, I don't think it's right for them, whoever, to say, we're not going to take your application because we don't think that you're eligible.
Mr. Ashby, did you?
For the benefit of the board, and I was going to make this announcement a little bit later on. As you all know, beginning, I believe, this year, City Council, about a year ago, requested that particular meetings be recorded. Even at the City Council meetings, sometimes we have issues about people being heard. And so what I wanted to make note of first is, and I'll mention this to Ms. Mosier, we will put these behind your nameplates because I think sometimes folks forget, especially at the board meeting level, not the city council level, that some of our meetings that have historically never been recorded are now recorded and put on the website verbatim. I appreciate the sheriff's particular concern. What I would advise everyone is certainly there's an issue in the generic with regard to how applications are taken, but we must be judicious in our language when we reference anyone in particular. At a later point, we will also discuss, because I know we've had this discussion one time before, even our new retirees, in terms of reporting new retirees, you may want to take up how we go about reporting or what information we report when we provide you new retirees in terms of what format. For instance, when I talk about that, in social services context and in the school board context, if they are dealing with student discipline, they will assign a number to someone and discuss that publicly because it doesn't identify the individual, or they will go into closed session to discuss that matter. This board may want to consider how it wishes to deal with individuals, because some of the information that you all consider is not what we would call generally public information. And now that there is what I would call less of a gap between the public and you all's work, you may want to consider how you address even the routine matters that we deal with when it comes to one specific person. And I just make mention of that. I will make sure I'll show Ms. Mosier where these are. Just as a reminder, because I will tell you the first 5 or 6 meetings we had, once it happened, I myself had forgotten that we were now being directly recorded and directly uploaded. So I just make that as a general announcement for your consideration.
What does the card say?
It says, please speak up. You are being recorded. When speaking, make sure the mic is not covered. And I'll give you one other piece. Thankfully, we don't have candy out at this meeting. And I'm talking about myself. At one point in time, I was
The rapper.
the mic is so sensitive. My habits were interfering with the recording to the point where the clerk pulled me aside and said I needed to adjust my habits. So please be aware, anything you do it right in the area of that mic, or if you cover it, it may affect the recording. So, but we'll put these out under your nameplates so there's sort of a reminder that that's going on.
Okay.
I'd still like an answer to my questions.
I think maybe that's something that you and Ms. Gooden can talk about after the meeting.
I mean, generically, anybody comes in, the board doesn't have a right to know. Anybody that works for the city or used to work for the city wants to come in and put in retirement papers, whether they're qualified or they're not qualified, does the city have the right to refuse them the application? Now, I know they can take the application and say, you're not qualified, but does the city have the right to refuse them the application? And I don't think they do. That's just me.
Let me respond.
Yes, please.
I'm going to say first and foremost, for the PRS and the fire and police application, there is a process in how that happens. They come in, they speak with Ms. McKinney or maybe some other member of staff. There's information. The actual application is drawn up by John Hancock. So it's not like VRS, I'm giving you an application and you're going to fill it out. I just want to make clear to the board that don't take isolated incidents and think that is the way that business is run on a day-to-day basis. If someone comes in, we've had other people since then, they've come in, they followed the normal process. So it's not a refusal. And that's what I just want to make clear in that regard. So we take any information we have and we're going to do the corresponding research. And anything else that comes up, it'll be brought forward to the board.
What's the normal process?
They'll call, it depends. I'll tell you this, we have people, in generality, they'll come, or sometimes they'll call or they'll email. Sometimes they just want us to run the numbers. We make a request to John Hancock, they run the numbers, they get it back to us. Is provided to the prospective person. They come, they decide they want to make application to actually retire. Staff submits information to John Hancock. We get the application. Sometimes with the candidates who wants to do, I'll tell you, basically, usually most part, they want to come in. Vested people, sometimes we actually will email it to them once we actually get it. There's nothing there that's an outright refusal in that regards. So I'll say that to you, but it takes a little bit of time in that regards. Once they make the application, they get back, we get something that's called a benefit commencement. Once we get that, that's when we actually have the numbers, how much their pension benefit's going to be. It lets them know we need, proof of we need the birth certificates, the other information, the taxes, and all that information. We usually call the person if it's actually a current employee. We'll get them to come by, sign the application, sign everything, the commencement. That's when they start getting benefits. That is also then provided back to John Hancock. Once everything's been finalized and approved, Rose McKinney, the Assistant Director, communicates with Ms. Mosier, lets her know that, Johnny Appleseed's, has been approved for retirement and he's going to retire on February 1st or whatever the corresponding date and time is.
If someone is not approved, do they receive a letter saying you're not eligible?
Well, can't tell you we've had too many instances of that, but it's going to come back to the board. We're just pretty much, I would say, a intermediary through the process.
Well, since I've been on the board, I've never seen a letter that's saying they've been refused. So whatever you're doing with these refusal letters, I don't know, because I've never seen one.
Let me go back and think about what I just said. I don't think I said anything about a refusal letter. I think what we had talked about, I said if somebody is going to be refused, if there's something that's going on, there has to be a decision that's been made. And typically that letter is coming out, it's been reviewed by someone. Let me be clear, and I want to say this, and I think what we either need to do this, we either need to go into closed session to talk about the case that you were referencing.
But any case, I don't want to, let's forget that case, that's over and done with.
But then it's hard for me to say that to you because I can't say that. I can't say that we've had a refusal. So that's the piece that I'm trying to say to you.
You mean to tell me all these years in the city, nobody's ever come in and put in retirement that's been refused?
I'm going to say this to you, Sheriff Waters. I got an 8-year gap. I've been back for 2 years. I can only tell you that's happened since the time that I've actually been back and been sitting on the board. Prior to that, I'll have to do some research and get back to the board.
Well, I've got a lot of calls from people. You got a new sheriff in town, and he ripped a lot of people. And of course, they have VSRS. They don't have the, police retirement or the city supplemental. But they're being told one particular person had to drive to Richmond to fill out the paperwork because they said they can't get the city to send it in. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but that's what VSRS in Richmond is telling people that are applying for the VSRS, that they have to get the paperwork from the city, but they're having a hard time getting the city to send it in. And I know that's another area, that's not our area, but it kind of concerns me a little bit that people work and they serve the time and they're eligible for retirement and they get run through a lot of hassles. Someday you're going to be in that position and everybody else is going to be in that position. And I personally just don't think it's fair.
Although that's not a matter for this board, I'll respond.
Right.
I'd say first and foremost, always keep in mind there's two sides to every story.
I understand that.
And case be known with VRS, you don't even have to come to Human Resources to apply for retirement. The forms are on the VRS website. Only thing a person has to do is fill out the forms. They can send them directly to VRS. There are instances we don't even know that somebody's applied for retirement until we get a letter from VRS, and they'll ask us to put in the employer certification. Okay, so you don't even have to come to see us. Mm-hmm. But I just want to remind you, there's two sides to every story.
Oh, I understand that.
Okay, so, and there's no need, so they don't even have to go to Richmond. You don't even have to come and see us.
Okay.
Follow up with that. If that's how VRS is set up, and you said a minute ago that the city. We're like an intermediary between us and John Hancock. Is that right?
I'd say for doing the paperwork in that regard, yes.
Is there the opportunity for John Hancock to do the same thing that VRS does?
I will say this to you. There are a lot of services that John Hancock can do for our retirement system. There's been a lot of different things that I even questioned, why do we do it the way we do it? Unfortunately, when the system was set up, what was shared with me was that the city decided, whoever the city was, whoever was sitting on the board or whoever decided that they wanted the role to be very hands-on. And that is the reason why they actually, in some regards, actually come here, see someone face-to-face. Believe it or not, if a retiree wants to change something as it relates to a direct deposit or something of that nature, they actually come to see us. And I kind of question that. I said, well, why do they need to come to see me if they want, a couple $100s to go somewhere, someplace else? Why can't they, do it like any place else? And what was shared with me, that's the way the city wanted it set up at the time. So we've been going through some lengths to make it a little bit more end-user friendly in that regards. And some of it to the extent, our hands have been tied a little bit. To the extent that we are actually involved, for every pensioner to get his pension, we actually, out of our office, send that information directly to the corresponding credit unions, which I think it's silly. I'm thinking, why would the fact that Johnny Appleseed, I don't know, I get on Johnny Appleseed today, but Johnny Appleseed needs to get his pension, why does that have to come through an encrypted file from my office to a credit union for that money to hit there? I raised a lot of concerns about that, and we're trying to see what we can do to fix it. But that was just how this was actually set up many, many years ago. Maybe that was before technology and everything else, but that's why it's set up that way. It's not something that, it's not my preference. There's a lot of information that retirees can get directly from John Hancock. Some of it, I just think it's history, and it's just, hey, it's the way you do it. You came to Human Resources, you did X, Y, Z. For example, if somebody wants a pension letter, let's say to get a mortgage or something, all they have to do is call John Hancock and say, hey, I need a pension letter, I'm refinancing, doing whatever. But they choose not to do that. They actually come in, or they call our office and they'll say, hey, we need to request a pension letter. So some of what we're going to be trying to do for 2018 is to really just educate people. I don't want to cut them off because some people need it. I mean, if you're older and maybe you don't have children or someone else to help you, you need that extra touch. And we don't mind doing it. But that's the way this system was set up many, many, many years ago.
Well, as far as making changes and all, y'all do a fantastic job, because I've had a couple changes. But I'll be honest, if I wasn't on this board, I wouldn't have any idea even who John Hancock was. I mean, as just an average public retiree, I mean, ask yourself, do you know anything? Would you know anything about John Hancock if you weren't on this board? I mean, I don't.
I did.
Yeah, and most of
They sent out letters.
and most people in my department, they know I'm on the board. They ask me questions. And I'll get a question, and the first thing I always say is, have you been to John Hancock's website and signed up? Because there's a lot of information on there that you don't need to get from HR. And 2 months later, they'll come to me, ask me another question. Same person, have you signed up for the website? Have you been there? Oh, no, I haven't done that yet. I'm not going to answer any more of your questions until you go sign up to the website. I mean, there's a lot of information. There's numbers right there.
Yeah, but
that's
they
real time.
don't know about it. I mean, is that average knowledge?
It should be. I mean, this is your pension you're talking about. Anybody that's worried about their living and what they're going to get paid, they should know who does their retirement benefits.
But unfortunately, I know Sheriff Waters is right. When this credit union issue happened, I knew somebody that didn't even know it had been changed from MetLife to John Hancock. So again, it's something that, they got a letter, they thought it was pro forma letter, they didn't really read it, and they didn't understand what was going on. So if Ms. Gooden is going to go out and start re-educating. I think that that will be very helpful because, as Mr. Harrington says, there is tons of information on their website that you can access. And then if you can't understand it or you can't do it, then HR, I'm sure, would be willing to step up and help.
Sure.
Well, they do a good job. I mean, I've contacted them a couple of times. I've always got excellent response from them. So I think the city's part is, they do a good job, but
Well, we've gotten way off track, so let's...
I could just add one comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, it's all good. I think the one thing everybody needs to understand, you have to keep in mind, John Hancock is pretty much your administrator. John Hancock is really supposed to be doing this day-to-day, a lot of this stuff. A lot of the things that we do here, we don't even get half, I don't even get a third, fourth of the questions from anybody who goes out on VRS. They do communicate information to the members, to the retirees. We get copies of it. They're telling us they're doing a seminar on this, a webinar on that. And don't get me wrong, you're probably like me, you get a lot of mail. Some of it read, some of you choose not to read. But your real, true-to-true, day-to-day administrator is supposed to be John Hancock. And that's the way it really should be. That's one of the things that I kind of brought up, not as soon as I got back, but recently, because it's a lot of extra stuff that we're doing. We pay John Hancock a good figure.
64,000 was right in there.
To do, but I want to be clear. We're paying them to provide a service. However, the services are coming from my staff, from my team. And I think that sometimes we don't stop to realize, because I almost tell them, I said, gosh, maybe we need to go out there and I'll get Alice to be our CFO and we can start our own little LLC and we'll do it for you. But that's what's going on. We're paying somebody to do the day-to-day, but the day-to-day is coming from the second floor in that regards.
Well, see, and the reason I asked is it seems to me if VRS is doing all this directly and you guys are acting as an intermediary, would it cut down on the time frame that it takes people to apply and to get going through the retirement process, number one? And would it cut down on the amount of work you guys have to do? I mean, I realize that you would be there as a backup if people don't understand. But.
Sure. Let me say this to you. For me, and I'll speak for the whole human resources team, for me, it's not about the work. As I tell people, we get paid to provide a service. As I tell people, as you've heard me say, I get paid to answer your questions. It's really not a lot of work to do somebody's retirement application in that regards. I mean, you're sitting down with them. Some people need a little bit more help. Sometimes what it really just bottles down to, and I have to say this to you, people talk to whomever they feel comfortable with, whoever they think is going to, give them that answer. But it's not a lot of work in that regards. The only other thing that relates to, I think sometimes people don't understand, and Sheriff Waters, because you brought up VRS, I'll say this. Even with VRS, you can make application today. They tell you to make application 90 days prior to your date. And lots of times people don't realize that, and they think the holdup is our office. And no, the holdup is you needed to plan 90 days to get it current. So we don't mind helping anyone. And so that is what we do. When they call us, we do what they need them to do. We give them their pension letters, whatever it is, even though it's readily available if they sign up. We still do it because I understand that not everybody's going to feel comfortable, going into a computer. And I always tell people, even though it's 2018, I don't walk on the assumption that everybody's got a computer and Wi-Fi access in their house. And sometimes people don't. They just need help. Thank you.
All right, then. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's move on to the unfinished business and the investment committee and RFP status.
Well, actually, we put that on hold until we get a more solid investment committee. I think Chris Westerman, what's that name? Is that
That's right, that's
what I thought. Was on the committee, and he's now off the board, so we put that on hold until we decide on the new investment committee.
Okey doke. So moving on to new business, I believe everybody should notice at the very last sheet of your package, we've got a meeting schedule, which reminding everybody that in February we will have the investment people, the financial people coming to make a presentation. And we'll just see how the year goes and whether or not we do end up having every single one of those meetings, but we'll definitely try to let everybody know enough in advance if we don't have any retirements or we don't have any immediate business that we need to conduct. So, moving on to the new investment committee selection. Alice, maybe you can just give a teeny bit of background as to
Sure.
expectations and what might be involved.
I think the investment committee is an important subgroup of the retirement board. The investment committee's, I guess, duties are in our bylaws, but selection of an investment advisor and oversight of the investment results would probably be the best way of describing the duties. Meet maybe twice a year, two or three times a year outside of the retirement board meeting.
And you all had already done some work. And
Yes, and we had put together an RFP and submitted or put the proposal out for RFP for investment advisors and have gotten back some
so I guess
results.
one of the things would be, are the two people that were formerly on the investment committee still interested in serving? And then is there anybody else in addition so that there's a third member to assist Ms. Kelly with this particular issue? Because we do have an RFP that's going to be floating around out there, and that would be one of the major responsibilities, to review those applications as they come in and decide if we want to come in for a presentation, or if, what kind of selection process we might go through.
Has the deadline for the RFP already passed?
We had a proposed deadline or proposed calendar in the RFP of when we were going to do the selection. Those deadlines definitely have passed, but they weren't really deadlines as much as guidelines of when we thought we would have the selection made and the contract issued. Right now, we have Greystone as our advisor, and we kind of have an open-ended contract with them, so there is no deadline for them to stop advising. We would like to get a different type of contract, obviously, than what we have right now with Greystone.
I know that the last major recommendation they made, the investment committee made, was on reallocating our funds. And that was done toward the end of the year, September, October, third, fourth quarter.
We actually did the implementation July through September.
Okay.
So they actually made the recommendation was made in the spring of last year of the reallocation of how the investments should be reallocated, and then the actual implementation to new managers was made through the course of July, August, and September. And so as of September 30th,
It was a
everything was all reallocated to the new investment allocation.
And that was a huge undertaking.
Yes.
And so now, the major agenda for the committee would be our bylaws, of which, they've been approved.
Well, selection of an investment advisor.
Okay.
So we had Greystone, we had Morgan Stanley.
Right.
And Greystone is part of the Morgan Stanley corporate. And so now it's just a matter of selecting an investment advisor and getting a regular contract with those investment advisors.
Well, from being on the investment committee prior or previous, I would certainly be willing to step down if we had other people that had better or more intimate knowledge of finances.
Yeah, I would do it.
All right, Mr. Moore has volunteered. That would, if you stayed on, that would still be 3 people, because that just sort of feels Chris's.
If there's anybody more interested, no, okay.
Well, why don't we,
Okay.
I mean, just as I'll throw this out, for right now, since everybody's brand new, but Mr. Moore does have experience in this exact type of work, why don't we try it working with the three of you for the time being, and then if you have time constraints, then we can discuss it in the next couple of meetings. Okay, can I have do we need a motion on that for a new member of the Finance Committee, don't you think?
I move.
That Mr. Moore be added to the Investment Committee? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please
Aye.
signify by saying aye. Thank you very much. All right, and our next issue is the recommendation to City Council on funding and benefits.
So before we move on, is there, since we're all together, is there a proposed next meeting date so people can check their calendars for the committee?
Oh, for the
Oh, for
investment.
the
Investment
committee.
committee.
Yeah.
I
Everybody,
didn't really have any in mind, actually, so,
What they've done in the past is Gail will email the three of us and ask for an availability for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I usually send something out and say we'd like to have one. What dates are not good, because I know you guys especially have constraints. And then whatever date, I keep a sticky note, write it down, and as soon as I know, I send out some dates and times.
does that still work for everybody?
So should we meet before the Greystone meeting?
yes.
That's what I was,
For the investment.
why I was
For next
asking, because
meeting.
So
that's
that's
coming up quickly.
the beginning of February, so we're going to meet sometime before then.
Yeah,
Yes.
sometime in the next 4 weeks.
Will Greystone have the materials to us for the investment committee meeting?
Probably not. They usually get it to me. I usually get it the Tuesday or Wednesday before the actual board meeting. That's usually when they get it to me.
Okay.
How many companies have applied?
This is a RFP process, and so while we're in the middle of the RFP process, you usually don't go over the details until after the selection's made.
Okay, so the deadline for that is still in play. I mean, we haven't met the deadline yet.
We put out an RFP. We have the selection. I'm sorry. The applicants have applied, and that it was closed, but we haven't done the selection of the firms yet.
Okay. So we have a finite number of people that have already
Yes,
applied.
we have some firms that have applied.
Okay. So how many? That's all we're asking. I mean, that shouldn't be privileged.
I don't know. Can I say that? Until the
It is in the, let me give you a little background on the procurement process. Procurement is handled for boards and commissions out of the procurement office. One of the issues about why you have confidentiality issues about the group or the process is because the committee that approves or reviews the proposals has a number of different options. One, for instance, if there were only one applicant, the committee could decide there's not enough demand or competition, we're not going to move forward with the RFP process. Because of decisions like that, there being nothing confirmed or moving forward, no selection has been made. Under the FOIA laws, only when the selection is made does the process become public. And because this board is not been put in place as that procurement review board, there is always a distance between that decision and the other, because when this board, staff, or whomever selects that committee, then they will have that opportunity to recommend or suggest that we just, start over again, get some more competition by some other means, or move forward. So the number doesn't, in the generic, seem to be an issue. The problem is, in certain realms, it may be indicative of who may be in the pool. And with this being closed and having not moved forward, it's a bit of an issue. Quite honestly, to the extent that the finance department, parts of the finance department aren't on that procurement committee, it's a bit of an issue.
So who can know? Who has access to the information, I guess, at this point?
The procurement, whoever is reviewing the proposals.
Which would be the investment committee, and a subset of the investment committee. And the three people were myself, Barbara Dameron, and Chris Westerman. And now he's off the board, and so we need to select a new person to be on the selection committee.
So then so the investment committee by itself will make the decision? Or, I mean, at some point, you're going to have to go to the board to say,
Yes.
RFP is over, here's what we recommend.
Correct.
Right, but we're not up
And you can
to
talk about
that point
everything
yet.
at that point.
We're not up to that point yet.
Once it's selected, if all the information from those providing would be go forward. But that investment committee acts just like any other procurement committee. You are separate and apart. Your meeting would be a closed session discussion. What you convey publicly will be limited until the process completes.
So there's an investment committee and a procurement committee.
I'm speaking procurement in general. What Ms. Kelly has just said is the investment committee is acting as what I refer to as the procurement committee.
Okay,
Well, we had a subset of the investment committee. We had the three people. The board voted on it. I'm not sure if you were at the meeting that the board was voted on it, but we voted on the three people to be on the selection committee. And that was myself, Barbara, and Chris Westerman. And we have the RFP went out, applicants applied, or the vendors applied, and we were at the process of reviewing the applications. Mr. Westerman is now off the board, and so it was determined that we would replace him on the investment committee. And do we want to, and so I think the investment committee needs to meet and determine who should be on the selection committee.
well, yeah, because you're ex officio members, right? So if there's two of you and one voting, well, Chris, one voting member, then there's only one voting member, right? Because you guys wouldn't be able
We
to...
would make the recommendation to the board,
Okay.
so we would not be voting on the contract itself. We would be just making the recommendation.
Okay.
Your recommendation would be one of the many or a couple? Or
We could do it a lot of different ways, and so that's the thing is, the thought probably is to have one investment advisor, but we could determine maybe it's better to have two. I mean, that's the whole thing is, you got to read the proposals to really determine what you...
that's not my question. My question
Okay.
is, the selection committee would recommend to the board only one
Yes.
candidate?
Typically, yes.
That was my question.
Typically, what you do for typical RFPs, you get the pool of applicants. You determine the best qualified based on the criteria in the RFP. You have interviews with the top two vendors, and you make a selection based on the interviews and the information in the packet. And then you recommend to whoever is making the final approval, the vendor.
So to Sue's point, if your recommendation comes forward and we wanted them to make a presentation to us, would that be in the purview of the board?
I'm just speaking from past experience that I know that has happened in the past. That was back in the 80s. But there was a lot more money then, and there was also, at that time, the opportunity to place the funds in several different firms' hands and not just one because of their managerial style, their aggressive versus conservative, et cetera. So I'm just putting in historical context. That may not necessarily be our situation right now with the amount of funds and how closely it needs to be guided because of the
Well-
bonds that we have.
We're selecting an investment advisor, and I think you're talking about investment managers.
Yes,
And
so
so
it
what
was
right
two
now,
different
we
things.
have Greystone helping select the managers that we're putting our funds in. And so we can definitely have Greystone bring in the managers of who's managing, let's just say, the real estate trust fund or the Lord Abbott, I think we
Right.
have as one of our managers. And they can definitely come in and talk to us, and we can have Greystone. Greystone is our advisor that is actually doing the due diligence with the managers. And so we're hiring an investment advisor to determine what managers we should have. I think what you're talking at, if I'm not mistaken, is in the past, the retirement board was determining which managers to put the money into. And what
Could very
we're
well
doing
be.
now is we have an investment advisor to help us figure out what managers to put that into.
And that was also back when there was one person who was in charge of the retirement system. So conducted all of that business. It was a separate individual and not part of an overall finance.
So it sounds like we need to move forward with an investment committee meeting to form or to solidify whoever's going to choose, just to move on.
I think so. And I think that's, to me, this is probably one of the most important decisions that the board has to make, and it's better to do it right than do it fast. So if we can schedule an investment committee meeting the next 2 weeks, Landon, we'll kind of go around your schedule. I know you have other commitments, obviously other job, not with the city. And we'll set that up and have a discussion on that. Bring it back to the board in February.
Are we ready to move on to C now?
Okay.
Recommendation to City Council?
Did you want me to talk
I
about it? Okay. Recently, the city council requested that we fund a supplement for retirees. They have come back and asked for more information and more, I think as the ordinance was written, it was 20 years of service. They have come back and said, well, we really wanted 20 years of credible service, which, and then they also asked for, it was retirees with 20 years of service. They asked to have come back and asked for the spousal beneficiaries to also get the supplement. So we are working on that. That is that's aside from council funding and benefits, which is a little bit different. So we are going back to council with a CMR and a potential ordinance for them to fund an additional supplement, not just for retirees with 20 years of service. And so I think we've gotten some calls from people that had 19 years or 18 years, and that their sick leave counted toward making their 20 years for retirement. So they had credible service. Well, we didn't do the supplement that way. We did the supplement that had to work 20 years. And so there was some concern about that. So we are going back to council January 22nd to revise what the supplement was. And so anybody that got a supplement already, you're not going to get another one, but there will be additional retirees and beneficiaries that will get a supplement. Is that clear?
So the city council was asking for these funds to come out of here, out of our
No.
No. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
The recommendation was that the general fund, if you will, or the city funds will pay that. It's not coming out of the trust fund. And that's why I'm saying I'm giving you information that's not coming out of the retirement trust fund.
Okay.
However, we are now in budget season where we're trying to determine the FY19 budget. And we the city manager had requested that the retirement board, if they so choose, provide a recommendation on the funding and the benefits for the retirement system. And, that's challenging because we're funded less than 75%, and any COLAs that you give will affect the funding status as well as the contribution the city has to provide to the system. The Andre Stewart, who is the actuary at John Hancock, who does our benefit, has provided to me, I asked, if we did a 1%, a 1.5%, and 2%, how much would that be and how much would that increase our liability? And so he has given me the numbers just past day or so, and I haven't had a chance to digest them. But the other thing I just wrote back, and he just answered me as we were talking, is we used the old mortality tables, which I think, Mr. Crutcher, you have asked about that. To use the new mortality tables impacts our funding for the city into the retirement system almost $1.5 million, $2 million. And so that's not even ridiculous. So I can look up the numbers right now. I haven't had a chance to really look at them. So unfortunately, but there is, the retirement boards can make a suggestion whether or not, city council approves it or whether or not the city has the funds to do that is another thing. But based on the funding that we have now and the recent history, it's up to the board to determine whether they want to make a recommendation or not.
So, based on, if we use the new mortality table that you're talking about, then we would have to ask the city council for an additional $1 million. Is that what is it?
I think what happens, and just to make it clear, for especially on the new members, every year the city gets a number from the actuary. It's called it used to be called the ARC, but now it's called the ADC, which is the actuarially determined contribution. And that is determined based on the investment results, the mortality of our retirees, how quickly people retire, although that's not as big of a factor because we have less than 40 active employees. And so they have this ADC number, actually determined contribution, that the city contributes to the retirement system. That is at over $8 million right now. In addition, the city is also paying pension bond payments that we had to issue bonds in 2013 to shore up the funding for our pension system. So in addition to the $8 million, the city is also paying debt service on those bonds of $11 million. So for our retirement system, out of the city's funds, we're paying $19 million for the people that are in the retirement system in this retirement trust fund. Comparison for VRS, that has many more people, we're paying about $7 million a year. And so every year you have this pot of money that we have to contribute to our retirement benefits, to our retirement pension benefits. That's not the health care, so put that aside. So we have $19 million that's going, $8 million goes to the trust fund to fund the payments, and the $11 million goes to pay off the bonds that were put into the trust fund. And that number increases every year based on people retiring and people, and I think Andre, when he was here, saying it's a good thing people are living longer, but for the trust fund, it pulls more money out of the trust fund. So as you can see by Gail's historic flow of funds, every month we're paying about $2.5 million out in benefits. And we're contributing $8 million a year, so you do the math. More money's going out than's coming in. And so you'd make that up by the investment returns. We've had a good couple of years of investment returns, so our numbers have stayed about the same. So in order to provide cost of living increases to retirees, the city would have to get the actuary, which is what I did, get the actuary to determine how much would that cost every year. And using the old mortality tables, that's about $300,000 a year to give a 1% COLA. Using the new mortality tables, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but it is much higher. Plus the 8 million goes up to almost 9 million. So there is that factor there. So as a board member, you need to take into account what retirees need, as well as we need to keep the trust as a whole. We have recommended in the past couple of years issuing a supplement, which doesn't touch the trust, but it did provide beneficiaries some measure of dollar amounts coming in. So I've done a lot of talking, and I don't want to glaze over. I can get a little bit more detailed, but.
Well, let me ask this question. Do you want to have is February too late for us to make some sort of a recommendation to council? So why don't we wait until she's had an opportunity to really see what these numbers are? And I don't know why, but I thought we discussed this some in November, did we not? So,
I think
we might
I
have
had
just
brought it up.
yeah.
That we had talked about it. But typically, it's the retirement board can make a recommendation. The city manager provides her budget to city council the end of March.
Right.
And so really to make a recommendation probably in February would have to be the latest we do. Just to be able to balance the budget, to give the council a balanced budget.
Reminding everybody that that's strictly a recommendation and that council will take all factors into account as far as whether they follow it or not, so.
So what I'd like to do is I'll send to the retirement board what we're funded at now, the 1%, and as Andre said, if it's 1%, double that, it's 2%. So it's there's no 2% is quite, 2% is double 1%, and 3% is triple 1%. So you could do the math. If 1.5 is 1.5 times the 1%. The issue you have is how much is funded, and our investments have been doing well, but it's only been 2 years, so that we're coming off of a investment slump there. So why don't I do this? I will give you the funding level, the amount we're contributing, the amount we would have to contribute for a 1% increase, and if you want to, you can multiply that. If you say 5%, it would be that. Okay.
I understand that you haven't adopted these new mortality tables, which basically people are living longer and your liability is higher. Why, at my other job, we had to adopt the accounting rules told us that we had to adopt these new mortality tables. I don't know if it's mandatory or we have to do it. If we don't have to adopt the new mortality tables, why would we? I mean, we know that the real liability is probably a little bit higher than what we report. I guess, is there...
Well, the city does not have to follow ERISA rules.
So is there some
We
sort
do.
of conflict?
We try
that
to.
We know that we're sort of understating the liability by a little bit? Which is essentially what we're doing by not adopting these mortality tables.
I just wanted to comment on, we don't have to follow ERISA, but keep in mind, if we don't, your liability and the amount of money you need to contribute annually to keep the pension fund whole, to keep it sustainable, is only as good as the assumptions you're making. And they're all assumptions. But if you have faulty assumptions, you could think you're 75% funded and find out that you're not down the road. well, that's kind of what led, I think, a little bit into the city having to issue pension bonds. The city has a limit on how much debt we can issue and how much debt service we can afford to pay. So you don't, now that we have these pension bonds, you don't want to have faulty assumptions that put you in that same position somewhere down the road, and maybe that's not an option to get us whole again. So you may want to add to that. But
If we're talking strictly on the point of the beneficiaries of the plan, the retirees, we'd want to adopt the new mortality tables and put more money in the plan.
I mean, my point is, you want, again, assumptions are assumptions, right? And they change every day. But you want to have the best out there that you can, because if we continue to fund the plan as if people aren't living as long, and they really are, then that could lead to some realities down the road that may not be so pleasant, not only for the city, but for the beneficiaries of the fund to have to face.
You're just kicking the can.
You're kicking the can.
Have we ever had an analysis of our population against the national actuarial tables? I mean, we have a very well-bounded population. What's been our experience against the mortality tables? Do we know?
Yes and no. I think when you start, and when Andre was here, Andre Stewart, our actuary, was here in October this year. He comes usually once a year, and we can ask him to come in a different meeting if we wanted to, or have him on the phone to ask questions. Our population, when we go against national trend, we have police and fire. We have different types of employees. Governmental employees are a little bit different than the national.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at. The types of employees we have tend to die earlier than the national tables, and so if we actually have better information, we're not hurting if we have a better actuarial estimate.
Sure. And that's kind of the issue you might have.
There are industry-specific mortality tables exist that you could potentially adopt.
That might be a good question.
I think that's a really good question to find out. I mean, if you can get something there to and then actually give them something on the other end and have it a net or close to a net, it's something to consider.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Yeah, unfortunately, you die earlier.
Thanks.
That's why they can retire at 20 years instead of at 30. To give them a few more golden years, allegedly. All right, are we ready to move on to the audit result schedule presentation information?
Yes. Every year we do an audit, and the city does an audit, and we produce a comprehensive annual financial report. I'll just show you the report. That is posted on the city's website. As part of that audit, we have the retirement system financial statements in that audit. We have to do a lot of reporting for not only our system, but the VRS system. And it's very, it's put in our CAFR. We do not do a separate financial statement for the retirement system. Most cities, I don't think, do. Some cities do.
Well, if they have their a very large and open pension,
Sure.
Very few.
Very few do. But we've never had the auditor come in and talk basically about our financial statements, and I didn't know if that's something that the board wanted to hear. And quite frankly, the audit's been done now for a few months, but we could set it up, and we actually are doing an RFP to get new external auditors. Every 5 years we go out for that. And so it was an idea that I thought of that, I don't know if the board wanted to see that or not. Very similar to the numbers that Gail gives you every month.
Something to think about. And are you, besides having it on the website, are you still giving a hard copy to the libraries?
Yes, we are.
So if anybody wanted to actually look at it on paper, thank you.
And we do have some extra copies in the finance department if any of the board members would like to see those. It's something that would happen in November or December. Okay.
I'm not sure we need a full audit presentation. I think we should specifically ask if there are any specific recommendations or weaknesses identified with our interests, that those would be reported to us without getting the whole report.
I'm really not quite sure why the auditors don't come to the retirement board and do that, because they come to the other boards and do that. So I will check with them, and I think that might be a requirement that they may have missed this year. So they should be coming to the board and asking that.
Is there any other new business to come before the board?
I had one question about the bylaws. In the bylaws, it talks about the officers, and third one down in the code speaks to the chief financial officer or funds administrator. There's a slash, but then elsewhere in the bylaws it refers to the treasurer. So I'm wondering if there's a term of art that didn't get changed when we adopted the new bylaws.
Probably. If you'd like, let me take a look at that.
Sure.
And we'll bring that back up maybe for a vote to amend the bylaws to clarify that.
Good catch. All right, if there's nothing else, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Everybody still stay safe out there.
Thank you much.